So today's message is entitled Do It Afraid. So I'm going to start off by telling you a story. There was a girl once upon a time, and she had to make some decisions in life. And the choice was to either stay where she was very comfortable, or it was to take a leap of faith and step out on faith and to do what she felt that at that time she was called to do. Now, granted, she was leaving a very familiar place where she worked with great people and she pretty much had the schedule that she wanted. Didn't exactly pay what she thought she was worth, but it was never about the money anyway. But she was going to venture out on a limb. Now, keep in mind, this individual at the time had a daughter who was only 1 to 2 years old. And so she decided she was going to go back to school, and she was actually going to go to law school. This person was also a single parent at this time. And law school was going to be about an hour and a half commute on a daily basis. So she decided she was going to leave what was familiar and she was going to go with what she thought she wanted to do at the time. So this person spent about 2 weeks in law school. This person realized that law school was not the right move. It was not the right time. And when they began to talk to other people that were currently in law school or had already graduated law school, they began to find out that they were not going to find as much fulfillment in law school as they originally thought they were. So now this person is without a job, again, a single parent. Luckily, this individual did have some money saved, so finding a job at that particular moment was not the top priority. It was no big rush, but this person also knew that they eventually was going to have to go back to work. So this individual went on the job searched for interviewed for 3 separate jobs, was offered all 3 jobs, and ended up taking a contract job. And so if you know anything about contract jobs, you know that eventually that job will go back up for contract or bid at some point. So this individual stayed in this job for probably about close to 6 years. There was some personal fulfillment there. There was a need and they enjoyed what they did. But then they began to feel that they had learned all they could in that particular position and that they needed to grow. So what did they do? They put themselves back out there, passed up on a great salary, but they put themselves back out there and they decided to venture out and find what was next for them. Now, that somebody is me. You're looking at this person. And so that's why I've entitled this message, Do It Afraid. Because let me tell you, I was very afraid to leave what was familiar for the unknown. For the most part, I'm mostly a play it safe type person, but every now and then again, I get some guts and I will do what I feel is right at the time. But what I've learned from that experience is you're not going to feel comfortable all the time, but that's when you grow. When you're afraid, that's when you grow. You're never going to test your limits if you don't try and if you always try to play it safe. And so many times people are in positions and jobs where they play it safe. That's their safe zone. They've pretty much maxed out as far as what they can learn, but they're comfortable. And so they stay. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. To that group of people who are happy where they are, this message is not for you. This message is for the people who in their gut, they know that they should be doing something else. And for whatever reason, fear has crept in and they are afraid to step out on a limb. Well, I'm living proof that every time I have stepped out on a limb, it's just been something better waiting for me. And I often tell people, you don't do things for money because the money may no longer be there. The money may run out. And I always choose happiness over money any day because you can't buy happiness. And so this message is for those who just feel like they're just not being fulfilled and they have not quite met their purpose. So again, we're going to talk about doing it and doing it afraid. And that's perfectly fine. So I've been reading this book by Mel Robbins, and it's called Taking Control of Your Life. And she talks about how fear paralyzes a person. It prevents us from going forward. It prevents us from moving. It also causes us to make bad decisions. How many times have you overreacted due to fear? And then when you thought about it, you're like, that probably wasn't my finest moment. I probably shouldn't have said that. I probably should not have done that. So fear causes us to do these things. Fear causes us not to be able to move forward. We're always looking back. We're always wondering. So it prevents us from taking the necessary steps forward that we need to take. And then fear also causes us to have negative self-talk. We will talk ourselves out of anything. And if you're willing to listen to that internal voice, you probably have talked yourselves out of a lot of things. But what I want to talk to you today is about stepping out on faith, living life to the fullest, accepting the things that you cannot change. And once you do those three things, you are going to yield success. So Mel Robbins also talks about little wins and celebrating little successes. And she uses the analogy of a Lego block. Now, I have a child, so of course we have Lego blocks. So one of my demonstrations. So you see this bag, it's full of Legos. When you try to look at the bag as a whole, this can become very daunting. It can become very challenging when you're thinking about all the pieces of this Lego set. Multiple pieces. And my daughter gets them everywhere. So what Mel Robbins talks about is that you take one piece at a time. And then you begin to put the pieces of the puzzle together. So it's piece by piece. That's how this thing works. And if that piece doesn't fit, what do? You try it again, or you try another piece. So that's how doing it in fear, that's how it works. You take it piece by piece, you take it step by step, you take it inch by inch. That's how you do it afraid. Because ask yourself this, would you rather do it afraid and fail, or never try and you never know? My advice would be shoot your shot. All they can say is yes, or all they can say is no. And there's been so many times that I've almost talked myself out of doing something, and I'm so glad that I didn't. So the job that I was telling you about that I found and that I worked at for 6 years. So when I felt like it was time for me to move on and grow, I decided I'm going to pitch an idea to HR. It was this program I had been working on. It was very successful. And I'm like, I could really help them with their wellness program. So let me step my game up. Let me design this program and let me pitch it. I did just that. And now I consult with this company. I kept a good working relationship with them. And now I consult with them and I help with their health and wellness program. So you see how shooting your shot, it actually works. Now, worst case scenario, they could have told me, we're not interested. And that would have been fine. That would have been fine with me. I would have had to be okay with their no. But what I've learned is this. When somebody tells you no, your response should be, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, next. That doesn't mean that you give up on your hopes and you give up on your dreams just because you got to know. Honey, let me tell you, you're not built for everybody, and that's okay. And I tell people that about myself all the time. I'm not for everybody, and that's okay. You have to be okay with that. You have to be okay with being told no, because where there's one no, eventually there could be one yes. So you don't stress out about the no. So doing it afraid and working under pressure, those things go hand in hand. And let's think about it from this standpoint. So for those of you who work out, you know that when you're in the process of building these muscles, you have these weights and you're working this muscle. And these are 5-pound weights, by the way. So you're working that muscle. Over time, what happens? That muscle becomes stronger. But before that muscle becomes stronger and you can move on to heavier weights, what happens? the muscle fibers are torn down, they're broken down. And then eventually those muscle fibers, they regenerate and they make you stronger and you're able to take on more weight. And this is the same thing that happens when you work under pressure. So many times when it gets tough, we want to run. And for a while there, and in some situations, I am that person. This is too hard. This is too tough. But then I have to remember all the things that I've been through that got me where I am today. And so sometimes you just have to welcome the challenge. You just have to pick up the weight and you have to keep on going, no matter how heavy that weights get. Because guess what? Over time, you are going to become used to that extra pressure. And then what happens? You're going to be able to take on more weight. And so you won't just be blown away every time a storm comes. Every time a storm comes, you're being knocked down. Once you build up enough strength, you won't be knocked down by those storms. Now, I'm not saying that you may not get rained on or that it may not be thunder in the forecast, but what I am saying is that you will remain resilient. You will have the wherewithal to withstand whatever comes your way. But that's only if you learn how to work under the pressure. Now, what also happens when you build up your muscle? Not only do you become stronger, but those muscles become more attractive. People look at those muscles and they compliment you on those muscles. And what does that do? That then builds your confidence. But again, you have to be able to work under the pressure. You have to be able to keep on going even when times are tough. Now, you also have got to have what we call grit. Grit, grit. Now with grit, I like to say, get ready, it's time. And you might say, time for what? It's time for you to take control. It's time for you to learn how to work under pressure. It's time for you to go after your goals. But you can't do it without grit. To be prepared mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and physically in order to have grit and to allow the grit to work. So how do you prepare? Okay, well, you go for the goal. You set your expectations high. You set those goals, you write those goals down, and then you figure out a plan of how you're going to attack each of those goals. And then you also have to remember that God is able to do exceedingly abundantly and above all that we could ever ask or think. So oftentimes we put limits on ourselves. God has no limit. We're the ones that set the tone for the limit. So we have to go for the goal. The R, we have to resist negativity. This includes negative people. This includes naysayers. And this also includes your biggest threat. Who's your biggest threat? It's you. It's the negative self-talk. So you have to be able to resist the thoughts that's going on in your head and that's trying to talk you out of things. You have to have the willpower inside to overcome even yourself. And a lot of times we think we're in competition with other people. No, you're just competing with yourself. That's all. No biggie. There's no race to be won. It's just a race against yourself. And so when you put it in those terms, you're not worried about what other people say and, what other people are doing because they're like non-factors. They don't matter. You also have to surround yourself with positive people. This is how you resist the negativity. You can't expect to be a positive person hanging around a bunch of negative Nancy's. It just doesn't work. And so you have to be able to set boundaries. Everybody does not deserve your energy. And people who drain you, you have to learn how to talk to them on occasion. And you have to be okay with that. I know I am. It took a while, but when I learned who drained my energy, now I know I only talk to them when my energy's high. Because I know by the end of that conversation, I'm going to be at an all-time low and I'm going to have to build myself back up again. So you have to know who to give energy to and when to give them energy. And it's not when you're already on E. You don't have anything left to give at that point. The I, you have to intensify your abilities and you have to invest in yourself. Intensify your abilities. Again, set those goals high. Do not put a limit on yourself. Reach higher. Stretch yourself. Stretch those muscles. That's only how they become stronger. Because what is not easily stretched is what? It's easily broken. It's easily blown away when the storm comes. Again, going back to intensifying your abilities. When you have a solid plan down, and that doesn't mean that nobody has, the ability to grow, but when you have your plan down and you think it's solid and you're confident with it, when you get told no, again, it's thank you next. Move on. And finally, the T in grit. Too much is given, much is required. So with this one, what I'm saying is when you get to where you want to go and you get to a point of elevation, you reach behind you or beside you and you bring the next person along with you. This will be your opportunity to bless other people. And I know we don't do things to get accolades, and we don't do nice things for people so we can be recognized. However, when you can give to others, that's an amazing feeling. And so, to much is given, much will also be required of you. You have to be ready, willing, and able to help the next person, because what you have to think about is all the people that have sowed into you and that have helped you along the way. It's only right that then you reach beside you or behind you and bring the next person up with you. So many times we feel like we're in competition with one another, and we get to the point where we don't even want to help our fellow man because we're afraid that they may bypass us. So we have to be okay with that. And we have to be more willing to help other people and not always thinking that we're in things for ourselves. Because when you can help others, again, that's a good feeling on the inside. And you just can't get that by getting accolades. It's the fact that, hey, I was able to help someone else and I was able to make someone else's life brighter, or I was able to just make someone else's life a little bit more bearable. And you would be surprised at how small gestures go a very long way. And it may not be that you have financial resources to give to someone. Giving your time is important. Sending a thank you note is important. So don't forget the small things. Now, in closing, I dare you to do it afraid. Do it afraid. Even if you fail, at least you tried. I gave you a few examples of ways that I have done it afraid, and I'm sure I have a few more examples. But the fact is, I'm still here, I'm still standing, and I'm a lot stronger than I was 5, 10 years ago. So it's okay. And I can't guarantee you that the first time you do it, it's going to be successful, because it might be a hot mess. But I applaud you just for trying. I applaud you for just stepping out on faith. Now, all the stories that I mentioned to you, when I talked about leaving one job to go to law school and then being without a job and then being offered 3 jobs, I tell that same story in my book, Born to Slay. And that's what I meant when I said in the beginning, we step out on faith, we live life to the fullest, we accept the things we cannot change, and trust me, you will yield success. So again, I dare you to do it, and I dare you to do it afraid. Hopefully, I've dropped some jewels along the way. Please join me again next week for my next motivational moment, and have a great week, you guys. Thank you.